On the broadcast tonight, it's day 3 of the 20-day-long parliamentary audit, and being grilled on this Wednesday are the nation's finance ministry officials. Issues on the table: next year's budget, tax code revisal, measures to boost the real estate market, and the nation's staggering sovereign debt, among others. President Park Geun-hye vows to make the best use of the nation's advanced information and communications technologies for more efficient use and conservation of electricity. And a monstrous once-in-a-decade typhoon lashes Japan, leaving casualties and damages. But what's more worrisome is the storm's path near the crippled Fukushima nuclear plant, where contaminated water used to cool reactor cores is being stored in temporary tanks. This is Early Edition at 6. It is 4 a.m. in Panama City, 12:30 p.m. in Tehran, and 6 on a Wednesday evening here in Seoul. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Chan. Thank you for joining us. The grilling continues at the National Assembly today.
The National Assembly's Finance Committee launched its audit of the Ministry of Strategy and Finance on this Wednesday during a visit to its offices in the administrative city of Sejong, south of Seoul.
Lawmakers took aim at the Park Geun-hye administration's budget for next year, its tax plans and measures to boost the real estate market. Our Kim Hyun-ji starts us off.
On Wednesday, lawmakers raised concerns about the nation's public sector debt, which is expected to surpass $900 billion for the first time ever this year. In particular, lawmakers said the unethical and at times corrupt management of state-owned public enterprises must be addressed, along with inefficiencies, because the practices contribute to the increase of government debt. Opposition lawmakers accused the government of not taking the fulfillment of President Park Geun-hye's major campaign pledges seriously enough, based on an analysis of the government budget for next year. President Park has said she will raise necessary funding for her welfare projects by cracking down on the nation's underground economy. She's also said that new taxes will not be introduced and existing ones will not be raised. However, even ruling party lawmakers pointed out Wednesday that the government needs to offer a more detailed plan for how it intends to go about taxing the underground economy. Opposition lawmakers said that President Park's idea for welfare without taxation is fundamentally problematic, and that it will ultimately do more harm than good to the nation's fiscal health. Another issue raised at the audit was the Finance Ministry's forecast for economic growth next year, which stands at 3.9%. The figure is higher than projections made by the OECD and other research institutes in Korea. Lawmakers said the government's forecast is unrealistically high and that it presents problems for next year's budget. Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok in response said he feels the figure is accurate. Opposition lawmakers also said the government's real estate policy is only designed to boost home ownership and real estate sales, and does not address the lack of affordable housing options for ordinary people. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
South Korea's Defense Minister Kim Kwon-jin on Wednesday made it clear that Korea is not keen on joining a U.S.-led missile defense program. The minister said the South Korean military aims to enhance its Korean air and missile defense system to better counter missile threats from North Korea. Now, he added that the U.S. missile program is too costly and the interception range is unnecessary on the Korean peninsula. Instead, the defense chief said the military had already approved a plan to upgrade its PAC-2 Patriot missiles to PAC-3s and develop mid- and long-range surface-to-air missiles. Kim added that the military is not considering purchasing SM-3 missiles or the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense System, which is focused on intercepting short, medium, and intermediate ballistic missiles, saying they are not a good fit for South Korea's needs.
Moving on to other stories, President Park Geun-hye stopped by a special session of the World Energy Congress in Daegu to deliver a speech. She called on the world to come up with new ways to better manage and use energy. Our presidential office correspondent, Jin-ju, files us this report.
President Park has pledged to develop Korea's energy industry into a driving force in her push for a creative economy. Speaking at a special session of the World Energy Congress in Daegu on Wednesday, President Park introduced a plan to use information and communications technology in energy storage and management systems to reduce energy consumption and then sell the saved energy to a power exchange market. By doing so, President Park said Korea could reduce the peak demand for electricity to at least 1 million kilowatts by the year 2017, create 15,000 new jobs, and a market worth $3.3 billion. The president proposed 3 ways to overcome the current energy challenges facing the world, which she called the energy trilemma. She first called for a new system in which energy-producing and consuming countries could cooperate to create a stable energy market and carry out joint projects for resources development. Possible projects could be the development of shale gas in North America and China and the development of crude oil and gas in East Siberia. President Park emphasized the importance of investing more in developing new energy technologies, from smart grids to eco-friendly cars, to minimize the negative impact on the environment and to boost job creation. She also said countries should revise their current energy policies and regulations, especially their pricing systems, at a time when the focus is being shifted to clean and safe energy. The World Energy Congress, dubbed the Energy Olympics, is held once every 3 years. This year's event is the biggest ever, with some 6,000 energy-related officials and experts from 110 countries participating. Oh Jin-ju, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye will embark on an 8-day trip that will take her to France, Britain, and Belgium on November 2nd. Her first stop, Paris, from the 2nd to the 4th. There she'll hold bilateral talks with French President François Hollande. The president will then travel to Britain for a 4-day state visit on the invitation of Queen Elizabeth. In addition to meeting the Queen, President Park is also expected to hold a bilateral summit with the British Prime Minister David Cameron and discuss ways to boost cooperation in the creative economy sector. She will end her 8-day trip in Belgium for summit talks with Prime Minister Elio Di Rupo, and then she is expected to meet with the presidents of the European Council and the European Commission for talks on bolstering trade based on the Korea-EU FTA.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with heroes and experts to help you understand the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best, with Moon Gun-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Now shifting gears to the economy, Korean import prices rose by 2 points. Well, turning now to some positive economic news, the nation's job market is picking up speed, registering the biggest job growth in a year in September and the first increase in almost a year and a half in the employment rate for people in their 20s. Here's Shin Se-min with the September job numbers.
Job creation accelerated last month when the employment rate for people in their 20s grew for the first time in 17 months. Statistics Korea said Wednesday that more than 25 million were employed in September, up more than 460,000 from the previous year. The September jobs numbers also reflect the largest gain in 12 months, when more than 680,000 new positions were added to the economy. The employment rate for people between the ages of 15 and 64 edged up 0.5 percentage points to 65% in September, a healthy figure by the international standards, but still below the current administration's target of 70%. The agency said that a rise in regular or salaried workers and a decline in the number of self-employed people had helped boost job creation by more than 400,000 jobs per month for 2 straight months. By sector, the health and social welfare services added the most jobs at over 172,000 in September from a year earlier, followed by the accommodations and restaurant businesses. In probably the most significant development, new jobs created for people in their 20s totaled 36,000, representing the first growth since April last year. Despite the added jobs, however, labor market conditions remain sluggish for the youth group. The jobless rate for people aged 15 to 29 stood at 7.7% in September, compared with the nation's overall jobless rate of 2.7%. The job data is in line with the government's projection that the nation's economy is on track for a steady recovery. The Korean economy grew 1.1% in the second quarter of this year from the previous quarter, rising above 1% for the first time in more than 2 years. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The United States crashes into the debt ceiling at midnight, and there is no deal yet in Washington. The deal-making resumes on this Wednesday, and there is hope as the government slides into day 16 of the shutdown. Legislators dropped hints on their way home Tuesday that Senate leaders will present a deal to raise the debt ceiling and reopen the partially shuttered government. But with no news of a deal struck in Capitol Hill, some fear for the worst. Our Kim Ji-yeon reports.
The budget battle between Republicans and Democrats has started to tug at the country's AAA credit rating. Ratings agency Fitch warned that it could downgrade the U.S. rating by 1 notch due to the political brinkmanship and reduced financing flexibility that could increase the risk of a U.S. default. The U.S. Treasury Department has warned that a default might trigger a financial crisis and recession that could echo the events of 2008 or worse. The credit agency's move comes after a series of failed attempts to solve the crisis. Senate Democrats called off 2 proposals advanced by the Republican-controlled House of Representatives ahead of the Thursday deadline. The new compromise had also failed to satisfy President Barack Obama and the Tea Party activists in the House, who are demanding changes to President Obama's signature health care law as part of any budget deal. Obama rejected the second plan, which included a provision to delay a tax on medical devices for 2 years that helps to fund the healthcare law, and would extend the federal debt ceiling of $16.7 trillion until February 7th. The plan would also extend government funding, but only until December 15th, so accepting that plan could mean another government shutdown before the end of the year. In comparison, a plan advanced by the Senate would keep the government open longer until January 15th. Meanwhile, the U.S. government has been partially shut down since October 1st, which has placed hundreds of thousands of employees on temporary leave. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Typhoon Wifa, the strongest typhoon Japan has seen in a decade, slammed into the northeastern part of the island nation on Wednesday, killing at least 14 and injuring dozens. However, it does appear that Fukushima came out unscathed. Our Han Daeun has the latest.
Japan's state-run broadcaster NHK has confirmed that 14 people were killed after Super Typhoon Wifa hit the nation on Wednesday. Most of the deaths occurred on Izu Oshima, an island south of Tokyo Bay, where more than 800 milliliters of rain were recorded earlier in the day, the most to fall in the region since 1938. Authorities say that roughly 50 residents of Oshima remain unaccounted for. The Japan Meteorological Agency says the typhoon has now passed northern Iwate Prefecture and is quickly moving northward, packing winds of up to 126 kilometers per hour. The typhoon flooded homes and caused power outages and mudslides in some areas in and around Tokyo, where local authorities advised more than 23,000 households to evacuate. To the concerns of many, the typhoon passed through the crippled Fukushima nuclear power plant at about noon local time, but no reports of damage have been made so far. The plant's operator, Tokyo Electric Power Corporation, released about 40 tons of rainwater that had accumulated in the compound into the sea, which it claims had previously cleared tests for radioactivity. However, there are lingering concerns as strong winds have further complicated cleanup efforts at the nuclear site. Han Daeun, Arirang News.
9 people have been confirmed dead and 2 are still missing after a Panama-flagged cargo ship sunk in waters off Korea's southeastern port city of Pohang late Tuesday. Korea Coast Guard officials say high waves and strong winds hampered rescue efforts, but 8 of the 19 crew members were rescued early Wednesday. 1 Vietnamese and 18 Chinese nationals were on board the vessel. The identities of the dead and rescued crew members have not been confirmed. Officials say they believe the 8,000-ton ship was set adrift in choppy waters as it was not anchored properly to the ocean floor near the Pohang port. There are also concerns that vessel which was carrying over 100 tons of oil and diesel could be spewing its load into the sea.
Well, if you're looking for a special fall evening out here in Seoul, this might be a piece of good news for you. The main royal palace of the Joseon Dynasty, one of the top tourist destinations in Seoul, is about to be even more accessible to the public, but only for a limited time. Gyeongbok Palace is extending its hours from 7 to 10 p.m. starting tonight through October 28th. Regular hours are from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. So if you're interested in checking out what the palace looks lit up at night, you're advised to arrive early. Only 1,500 visitors per day will be allowed in during those hours. Foreigners can purchase tickets at a separate booth to avoid the long lines. Ticket prices run 3,000 won, that's roughly $3 per person. Now, global warming is often discussed as a problem that will affect the future generations of the world, but a mounting body of evidence suggests that climate change is neither distant nor theoretical. It's here and now.
So how real is this threat to the human race at present time, and how much has the planet actually warmed up, and what is causing it? Well, for answers to these questions and more, we're joined live in the studio by Choi Jung-hoon, General Manager at the Climate Change Center in Seoul. Mr. Choi, thank you for being here with us on this program.
Thanks for inviting me to the program.
Now, climate change, we're all aware that global warming is a grave threat to humans here, but satellite data from NASA collected through, I believe, the years 2000 to 2011, released back in September, indicate that the world is not warming up as quickly as UN computer models predicted. Now, but scientists, however, continue to argue otherwise. They warn of a grave threat. Now, what's your view on this, and really, how real is this threat?
Well, I think overall the science is quite clear. There is, in fact, enough scientific evidence to support the view that climate change is continuing. If there's one body that represents the international scientific consensus on global warming, it has to be the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. The IPCC recently released its fifth report on the science of global warming. The report basically says that warming of the climate system is now unequivocal, and that humans are in fact the main cause of global warming since the 1950s. And apart from what the report has to say, I think there is also enough empirical evidence around us that also points the direction that global warming is continuing. Ocean measurements and also satellites show that sea level just keep rising. And here in Korea, we see more and more sweltering heat, torrential rainfalls in the summer, and also the types of plants that grow in Korea is also being changed. So I think all of these really points to the fact that global warming is still continuing.
So let me ask you this then, how quickly is this planet warming up?
Well, take sea level rise, for instance. The IPCC projected that the global sea level would rise by up to 98 centimeters by the end of the century. Korean Meteorological Administration did a similar study and concluded that by the middle of the century, sea level in Korea would rise up to 27 centimeters, and that's about 3 times as much as originally predicted by other scientists.
Okay, well, here in Korea, we used to boast the 4 seasons, but as soon as I returned to Korea sometime in 2000, it seems like it's being reduced to maybe 2.5 seasons per year. Clearly, our climate is becoming more similar to one of the subtropics. And what other signs of global warming are we seeing, not just in Korea, but obviously from around the world?
Well, obviously, the number of cold days is getting shorter, whereas the number of hot days is getting longer. And the pattern of rainfall is also being altered in many regions of the world. And a study just published in the journal Nature basically says that climate change, in fact, is the main driver behind El Nino. And El Nino is something that has a tremendous effect on rainfall patterns, and also can trigger severe droughts and floods. And according to Munich Re, which is the world's largest reinsurance company, around $150 billion worth of economic losses were incurred last year alone because of weather-related events.
So if, according to those sci-fi disaster movies, there are more chances of us dying of heat than cold, basically.
Well, a new report by the ICC just came out, and it says if global climate change were to progress at the current speed, most parts or many parts of major cities will be submerged now underwater. Now, and Korea is no exception, am I correct?
Right. I mean, if we apply the worst-case scenario to Korea, in fact, the major infrastructure facilities in the southern and western part of the country will get damaged seriously by towards the end of this decade by flooding. And those affected infrastructure will likely include the international airport and also a nuclear power plant down in the south, in Yeonggwang. And if, in fact, this were to be coupled with other natural disasters like typhoons and tsunami, you can only imagine how catastrophic the consequence will be there.
Okay, we've talked enough about the problems. We understand that human beings are, of course, a big part of the problem. And what can we do to become a greater part of the solution? In the worst-case scenario, what could be done at a global level, at the Korean governmental level, and, of course, individual levels other than driving electric vehicles and farting less?
Well, I think on an individual level, we have to understand that most of our energy comes from coal, oil, and gas. Therefore, using less energy automatically leads to a less emission of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And individuals, in fact, can start from something as simple as driving less or turning off lights or appliances when they're not in need, when they're not needed. The government, on the other hand, I think, really has to develop and use more energy sources that emit little or no carbon dioxide, such as solar power, wind power, or other renewable energy sources. And I think the government, most importantly, also has to communicate with people that climate change is something, is a present problem. And what I mean by that is that in Korea, climate change is largely perceived as a future problem or as a foreign problem, whereas it's already happening now, and many of us are already beginning to feel its impact.
All right, and the Energy Congress down in Daegu, it comes to a close tomorrow, and one of the issues, of course, discussed was global climate change, and what is said as an energy trilemma included global climate change, and most of it sounded like, to me, that it was the result of too much of fossil fuel use. Now, what other alternatives can we go for in order to prevent this climate change?
Well, I think really the industry here, especially in Korea, should really take the lead, because industry is the largest emitter of carbon dioxide, and that's kind of largely neglected in the Korean context. And the government is trying to introduce cap and trade like the system, and just trying to rely on the market mechanism to regulate the industry. I think that's a very good approach.
Okay, Mr. Choi Jung-un, General Manager at the Climate Change Center in Seoul, thank you for reminding us that knowing is not enough, that we have to do something about it.
Thanks for having me.
Time for weather. That means we turn to our Kim Bo-kyung. Hello, Bo-kyung. I understand Mount Seorak is turning, really changing color to suit the autumn atmosphere.
That's right. Mount Seorak is changing colors, and tomorrow is shaping up to be even colder.
Right. I heard that 7 centimeters of snow fell on Mount Seorak, which reflects the cold temperatures that are moving in. And now many of our viewers will be wondering, are we in for even colder weather in the days to come?
Sure, Kanyang, the temperatures will drop even further. Now, if you thought today was cold, brace yourselves for colder weather because tomorrow is expected to be the coldest of the season so far. So please be sure to bundle up before you head out in the morning. The average daytime high around the nation will hit 20 degrees, but we will get back to our typical autumn temperatures over the weekend. Now, moving on to tomorrow's forecast, Seoul and Gwangju's morning lows will drop to 7 degrees before reaching 19 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, Busan should stay relatively warm with a low of 11 degrees. Moving on to other region, Daejeon drops to 4 degrees with a daytime high of 17. Meanwhile, Myeongkang will peak at 8 degrees. Well, that's all I have for you this hour. Hope you have a wonderful evening and join me for another update after 8.
Thank you for that, Park Geun-hye, and that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Chen.
And I'm Moon Geon-young. Thank you as always for being here with us. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll see you right back here same time tomorrow. Good night.